This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. SoFlo Radio, RadioNet.com, We Act Radio, 1480 AM in Washington, D.C. Or thank you if you're checking out the podcast or watching us on YouTube. We appreciate you wherever you're listening.
Indeed.
And thanks to David Bender for joining us for that last two segments. It's very nice of him. And he said something that really provoked Shane and I's thought process.
Which is his feet when it comes to me.
Well, as often happens when we speak to the great David Bender, the Republicans have constantly been the party of government is bad. The party of government needs to be drowned in a bathtub. But it seems like it's getting harder and harder to say that that's not also the role of the Democrats. At least they're living up to it.
Well, if you think back to a lot of President Obama's speeches through time, and this has been a long-standing progressive and liberal tradition, that government is a good thing. We are the government, we the people. That government is put in place. Yes, it has limitations because we are free people, but it is there for good. It's there for safety. It is there, when I mean safety, I don't just mean bombing things, I mean economic safety. It's there to provide for children, education, to take the first steps towards equality when it comes to racial equality,
right.
Sexual orientation equality. The government is a source of good, and that's the liberal stance. The conservative stance is that government, if left to its own devices, is an evil thing. It is a bad thing. And it will oppress you because people cannot be trusted.
Right.
And so this has been the constant debate back and forth. What's the proper role of government? And when President Obama gave his inaugural speech, he said, yes, let's have that conversation because I think government's good. I think government has great things it can accomplish. We've gone to the moon. I mean, he didn't say that, I don't think, specifically in this speech, but those types of ideas. And conservatives say we should shrink government. Shrink, cut, leave it to people. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're just saying the people are the government and the government can be good. So when Republicans are elected, they prove that government's really bad because they're really bad at it. And
yes.
we constantly think, well, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in their case. But it's awfully difficult to make the case that government is good as a progressive or as a Democrat in the case of President Obama, when the government under Democrats can do some pretty lousy things too.
Yes.
And I'm speaking, of course, of cases in terms of swabbing, well, that's the Supreme Court, swabbing for DNA and saying that's fine, we can have your DNA if you get arrested. Or more importantly, we want every bit of information we can possibly get on you short of wiretapping and listening to your conversations.
Right, which I'm sorry, I used to think of as a conspiracy theory, but I'm not entirely convinced it's not happening.
Oh, it is happening.
Right.
It is.
It's just...
I mean, it's just to what extent.
Yes.
I'm worried about tips of icebergs too, but just this tip of the iceberg is concerning enough. And of course, you can fill everybody, and everyone knows this already.
Right.
But
everybody has, I'm sure, heard the stories this week of the NSA collecting phone records on millions of Verizon customers and the government essentially data mining, which going in and collecting large swaths of data from internet technology firms like Yahoo, Google, Facebook, AOL, Skype, YouTube, Apple, and Microsoft, which pretty much covers what everybody uses.
Yeah, and we know how they do it. There's a new report out that says, there isn't a backdoor in, but what we do is they kind of fill out a little request form, and we dump it all into this one server, and they come into the server and they take it out like a mailbox, or
right.
If you
it's like Dropbox.
You remember when you had the dairy person, you'd fill out the form, I want this much heavy cream, this much milk, this much ice cream, and you put it in a little box outside your door. You come home, and the dairy delivery guy has put it in the box there.
I don't remember that.
How about this?
That's an analogy I don't know that most people can identify
Netflix.
with.
Say, I want these are my movies in queue, and all of a sudden they show up at your doorstep.
That's a little
How's
bit
that?
more reasonable.
All right.
Yes.
Well, something kind of like this is what we want, and they're pretty ticked, I think. At least that's what they're saying outwardly, to the extent they can say anything, that they're required under law. They're given complete immunity,
right.
and they must do it.
Well, Google has fought this as on the levels that they can. They
Right.
fought, these NSA letters saying we
How do
don't
you
want
fight something in secret?
Right.
Because
and
often when you're fighting something, you need popular support behind you to win, especially when you're battling City Hall, or in this case, the federal government. You need that popular support, and you can't go get it because you can't tell the populace.
Right. And it leaves so few places that you can continue to express frustration in your government and not worry that, they're tracking what you're saying, what you're doing, where you are.
Without privacy, the revolutionaries could have never overthrown the British.
Right. And it's just...
In any revolution, in any type of movement, and I'm not talking about necessarily violent movements, peaceful movements, they can be nipped at the bud because they'll know about it before they even happen. That you can't have that free exchange of ideas of what are we going to do as a small group, a larger group, if you can't exchange ideas without it being constantly spied on.
Right. And I mean, it's so frustrating. As we were speaking with Jacob Dean this week when he was filling in for Nicole Sandler on RadioOrNot.com, and I said to him that it's very frustrating as I really do try and stick with our president when I can. That the Republicans, well, at least up until recently, have been so good at falling in line, at marching in step, and that's why they win elections. And on some level, I feel like we need to support the issues that we agree with our president on and continue to push him to be better in the other areas. But when stories like this come out, and essentially it seems like he's just continuing Bush administration policies, if not even worsening them, it is very hard to remember those bits and pieces that I agree with him on and say that these are the reasons I need to stand with him.
To an extent, you get resentful because you feel like you've been duped by the guy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to pile on here, but this is what he said when he was running for president the first time.
There should be no contradiction between keeping America safe and secure and respecting our Constitution.
See, it doesn't even sound like the same person. The same person that this week came out and defended these spying programs, saying they are legal and that
they're a trade-off.
Yeah, they're a trade-off.
I specifically said that one of the things that we're going to have to discuss and debate is how are we striking this balance between the need to keep the American people safe and our concerns about privacy.
I think he needs to go back and read some Ben Franklin.
Yeah, or just listen to his own speeches.
Between keeping America safe and secure.
They're not mutually exclusive, and he's talking about balancing, so you lose some of both.
No, unacceptable.
And when he gave his when he was talking about the NSA program, he talked about his priorities, I believe, in terms of what his job is.
When I came into this office, I made two commitments that are more important than any commitment I made.
So more important.
Number one, to keep the American people safe. And number two, to uphold the Constitution.
Number one, keep us safe. Number two, uphold the Constitution. I'm sorry, you have it backwards, Mr. President.
Right. I was going to say...
You follow the Constitution and within the confines of the Constitution because the Constitution does confine you, Mr. President. Keep us safe.
And I'm also frustrated, with some on the left who say we can't blame Obama for this because this was a Bush administration policy. It's been going on for 7 years, so how is this Obama's fault? Bull. That means he's had 5 years to stop it. That means he's had 5 years to rein in these powers and chose not to.
I do understand that you can call it hypocrisy on the right saying they didn't complain before. They're complaining now.
Yeah,
but even more miraculously, you have people on the right saying, uh-oh, we didn't think of this before. We thought they were just going to be wiretapping the brown, Islamic terrorist people. They have our information too.
Right.
Uh-oh.
It's just, it gets harder and harder to find a reason to support the lesser of two evils. I don't even like that phrase. I get frustrated by it, but this news just leaves me almost without words. And this is just a tease coming up later in the show, why we spoke with Lee Tien. We recorded an interview with him. He is a senior staff attorney at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and we're going to play it for you a little later.
A group that's been working on this for way longer than just the last week.
Yes. But Republicans have been the ones who've supposed to say government is bad. And the Democrats are leaving us no choice but to say the government is bad. And while we want to continue to say the government is us, I don't think that we're sitting around holding hands saying, hey, let's spy on each other.
No. And that's what happens when we've talked about this a lot for the last months. The separation between the government being us and the people in government not representing us. This is another situation in which they're not.
Yeah.
They're not. And if this was so darn good, if this was such a, this was wide enough so we could catch people who had intent to have terrorist plots, who were contacting other countries, how come they didn't catch the Boston? I'm sorry to put that out there, but if we're striking a balance that we're going to be giving up all of our privacy to keep us safe, the balance isn't struck. And I'm certainly not saying do more. I'm saying that it's not worth it.
Right. And I don't remember us ever being asked whether or not we wanted to give up some of that privacy in exchange for security. And
in fact, anytime people come to the courts and say, I don't want my privacy violated, I represent, whether it be the ACLU, the EFF, Amnesty International, things like that, the courts have said, well, you can't prove that you're one of the ones, so get out of here.
You
We're not
lack
even
standing.
Because the government's sole purpose in legal action is to prevent them ever deciding whether it's constitutional or not. They just say, you're not the right person to challenge it. In other words, leaving no one to challenge it.
Well,
no one. And now there are people too.
I would say a class action suit by every single Verizon customer might have a little hard time saying that they lack standing now that they know their records were handed over to the NSA without probable cause, suspicion, or...
When it comes to things like Facebook, Yahoo, Google, Apple, I think there's going to be a harder time because when you hit all those terms and conditions except, it doesn't say necessarily we can give it to the government, but it says we get to collect all this and it's not private. So I would wonder if there is even an action there. There needs to be some kind of mass movement to say, and it's so hard because we're so technologically dependent and intertwined with our technology to say, we're only going to use those companies that don't do this to us.
Credo.
Difficult when all of them do.
We need online companies equivalent to Credo.
Yeah.
Credo is a phone company that will not participate in this, that won't agree with the government's...
And I'll do in defense of like these companies, I've said that they don't want to do it. They're under court orders.
Right.
They essentially do it, or we're going to put you out of business, or we're going to find you $1 gazillion a day, or you're not going to be able to operate here.
Which is hypocritical in and of itself, because these same companies will gladly sell that same information to make a few bucks on advertising. They just don't want to get the legal liability of handing it over to the government,
or just the stigma and hurting their brand. If there were not, 2, 3, 4 year contracts with Verizon, AT&T be getting a lot of signups today, I have a feeling.
Yeah, well, guess what? Credo will buy you out of your contract.
What?
Credo will buy you out of your contract, buy you out of your phone contract.
There you go.
So if you are a Verizon customer, or probably any other major phone companies, which I will admit that we are as well, perhaps we should all be making the switch to Credo, and they will buy you out of your contract.
Wow.
Yes. So... Anyhow, that's been our rant over this. We're going to get into it more throughout the show, but we're going to be speaking with Ian Millhiser of Think Progress in just a few minutes about other news that's not getting enough attention this week, the D.C. Circuit Court and what's going on there, as well as some really interesting racist comments by judges. We're going to talk to him in just a few minutes. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we'll be back with more. Stick around.
Hey, it's Hal Sparks from the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, and this is Talking Left.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without big brothers, big sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. and that can last a lifetime. Start something today at BigBrothersBigSisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/cancer answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday right here on 1480 AM We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 AM We Act Radio.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Arc. The Arc is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Arc is also home to the Arc Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Arc, so stop by and see them. The Arc, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Arc's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Arc, part of Southeast D.C.
I think there's something in my soul. It's in the cards, and we both know.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. In just a few minutes, we're going to speak with Ian Millhiser. Ian is the Senior Constitutional Policy Analyst at the Center for American Progress, and he is the editor of Think Progress Justice. He knows a thing or two about a thing or two.
Great. One of my favorite sections of Think Progress.
Yes, and one of our favorite people to talk to. Although every single person at Think Progress seems to not only be brilliant, but be delightful.
Indeed.
I have never spoken to anybody
I
there
know that
I did.
They write, they are so prolific, but they need to be doing a podcast.
Yes.
Coast does one. Netroots is doing them. Media Matters is doing them. Come on, they are so phenomenal.
I would listen to it every day.
Yes.
Well, we're going to be speaking with him about a couple things, but one of the things we're going to get to is President Obama's nomination to the D.C. District Court. In all the news about the NSA,
D.C. Circuit.
I don't know why I have a mental block.
There are D.C. district courts. There's lots of them though. They're little ones. They're the itsy-bitsy ones.
You explain that to me, and I completely understand it, but for some reason, it always comes out of my mouth the wrong way. To the D.C. Circuit
Court of Appeals.
Yes, he appointed or nominated three nominees.
That's generally what you nominate. You nominate nominees.
Actually,
you don't nominate nominees because until you nominate them, they're not actually nominees.
Thank you.
They're attorneys. How about that?
3 attorneys. Patricia Ann Millett. She is a a partner at the law firm.
Gump.
Thank you.
Yes, so they also do SCOTUS blog, by the way.
Yes.
Another blog out there. Great source.
Law professor Cornelia Nina Pollard and D.C. District Court Judge Robert Wilkins to fill the vacancies on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals.
And Sri Srinivasan has just been confirmed. So right now there are 8, and that means 3 openings. So there's 11 spots.
Right.
Right now it's 4 and 4. 4 Democratic.
I'm sure that'll
appointments.
go. I'm sure that'll go over
And that's
so
where,
well.
And that's where the conservatives want to. That's enough. That whoa. We're at equal. You liberals like equal. Let's just stop right there.
Right. And the fact is, this court handles some of the most important, complex cases in the entire country. So while the Republicans have gotten this new talking point of, let's just eliminate those other 3 judgeships, we don't really need them
because what they're saying is the number of cases that go through there are not quite as large as the other ones. Now, the way the courts are worked out, there's 11 of them that are based on geography. Well, 12 if you count the D.C. Circuit. There are 11 circuit courts of appeal, 1 through 11, and they're different parts of the country. And then you have the D.C., which just takes appeals from D.C. federal district courts. But that's where you go to sue the government. And the government gets sued a lot. And these are really important. When you sue the EPA, it affects everybody. So while there may not be a huge number of cases, the gravity, the complexity, the effect of these cases is widespread. And therefore, it is good to have more justices on that court. There's one other one called the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. We won't even bother with it. But that one actually has the least number of cases.
Well, Harry Reid has come out saying that if Republicans block these 3 judgeships, if they filibuster these 3 positions, that he will finally employ the nuclear option, so it's called, and reform the filibuster as it applies to federal nominees. I can't help but wonder if the Republicans are going to call his bluff. I mean, how many times have we heard this from Harry Reid? If you do that just one more time...
It means that we should be paying attention as we will, and it will be interesting, to say the least.
Right.
This was when we spoke at the beginning of this year. The most important part of setting new filibuster rules, we said, wasn't really for legislation because the House could stop it. That it was going to be for the confirmation process. We've seen that play out over and over and over again, and this is a showdown. This is a meet you by the gym at noon.
And this is a showdown over a court that could not be more important. Just to give you an idea, this is
second only to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, this court handled the NLRB decision, labor board stuff. It handled business and Wall Street regulations. It handles the EPA cases. It handles cases that affect the nation as a whole. It affects workers, the environment, pro-business reforms. This is why it's important, and this is why we're going to get Ian Millhiser's take on it coming up next. We will be right back.
This is going to be fun.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
If you see things that really are not there, are you crazy? Maybe not. Maybe the ones who put the non-existent things there for you to see are the crazy ones. Recently, this surrealistic phenomena of unreal there-ness appeared in Seaside Heights, New Jersey. This shore town had been devastated by Hurricane Sandy last October, shutting down its boardwalk shops and rides. But in mid-May, England's Prince Harry came to Jersey for a royal visit, and Governor Chris Christie led him to the town's boardwalk to highlight the people's resilient spirit and determination to rebuild. The shops and rides remain closed, yet, bizarrely, the prince saw bustling enterprises and kids having fun. Did his royal eyes deceive him? No, Christie did. The governor staged a business-as-usual visual for the visitor. Spiffed-up clam bars and hot dog stands were staffed with people who appeared to be preparing and serving food, but nothing was actually being cooked. Also, children were brought in to play darts, wiffle ball, and other games at booths that had been opened, staffed, and stocked with prizes just for the brief time of Harry's pass-through. Even the twisted skeleton of the town's iconic roller coaster, which had been knocked into the ocean by the raging hurricane, still sat in the waves. It was kept there as a prop to give the prince a sense of the fury the town had suffered. As he gazed at it for a few moments, a demolition crew was positioned out of sight, ready to dismantle it as soon as the governor and the prince departed. This is Jim Hightower saying, a 7-year-old girl who got to talk with Harry at a game booth later asked a reporter an impertinent question. Is he a real-life prince? She doubted it, for he had no cape or sword. But yes, the prince was real, unlike the unreal images he saw on the boardwalk.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
For 35 years, I dug all the coal. Yeah, buddy, I did my time. So I have a name for a man like Greg Boyce. I believe he has no soul. And I didn't work not one damn day, not one for Patriot Coal.
You still fired up? Yeah! Are you fired up? Yeah! Are you fed up? Yeah! Are you ready to fight? Yeah! We stand today not because we want more money. We want justice today.
United Mine Workers of America President Cecil Roberts, 5,000 coal miners and their supporters rallied here in Henderson, Kentucky Tuesday demanding justice from Peabody Energy, Patriot, and Arch Coal. The UMWA says Peabody is robbing miners of retiree benefits by using bankruptcy law in a scheme to get rid of pension and retiree health care obligations earned by miners who spent decades in the mines. The union is appealing the bankruptcy ruling and is organizing a movement to fight the loss of the promised and earned benefits.
This movement right here is the United Mine Workers Traveling Salvation Show.
Doyle Conyer is a retired Crittenden, Kentucky miner.
It's always the same story, even back when I started in 76. Less men, more coal. That's what they want. You know, they talk about some of the poor people now, they have to choose between medicine and food. We're going to be right there with them in a few days if we don't get this turned around.
Illinois miner Gary Schwartz says miners who depend on these retiree health care benefits are being hurt by Peabody's lies.
And they think they can just throw us out. They don't need us no more because they think we're done, but we're not. And we're here to let them know that we're not done. And this is not over with until we say it's over with.
You all are hereby ordered to vacate this intersection or be subject to criminal arrest for obstructing a highway in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Will you remove yourself from this intersection? You will not. Is that correct? Yes.
14 people, including UMWA President Cecil Roberts, were arrested after sitting down in an intersection in a symbolic, peaceful civil disobedience action. The UMWA is planning rallies into September, as well as legal challenges to the cutoff of retiree health benefits and the end of Patriot coal payments into the UMWA retirement system. For Workers Independent News, Doug Cunningham, Henderson, Kentucky.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human. And she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. We are very thrilled to be talking to our next guest, Ian Millhiser. He is a senior constitutional policy analyst at the Center for American Progress Action Fund and the editor of Think Progress Justice, and somebody we adore speaking with. Ian, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good to be back. Thank you so much.
We can't get enough of you. I really wanted to get your take on this D.C. Circuit Court nominations. It seems like it's fallen out of the news cycle this week because of all the stuff going on with the NSA. What are your thoughts on Obama's nominees, and do you think the Republicans are going to call Harry Reid's bluff on this nuclear option?
All right, so, a little background about the D.C. Circuit, I think is helpful. This is the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit is the second most powerful court in the country below the Supreme Court. There's a whole bunch of very complex, very important cases dealing with federal regulation and with national security that can only be heard in the D.C. Circuit. And what has happened for most of Obama's presidency is the D.C. Circuit is very conservative. Most of the judges on the D.C. Circuit are Republicans. There's some very, very, very conservative judges on this court. So they've struck down clean air regulations that would have prevented as many as 34,000 deaths. They've tried to hobble the National Labor Relations Board, which is the agency that protects unions and labor rights. There are two judges on the D.C. Circuit who literally wrote opinion saying that virtually all business regulation, all labor regulation, all Wall Street regulation is unconstitutional. This is a deeply conservative court, and the Senate Republicans want to keep it that way, because if they keep it that way, it does a great deal to thwart the president's agenda and to implement their agenda. Obama finally nominated 3 people to 3 seats on this court that have been vacant on the court. If these people are confirmed, it's going to transform this very conservative court into a court that looks, more like the sorts of judges that Obama's been appointing. And so you're going to have a fight over this. This is what could trigger nuclear war, where Republicans may try to filibuster all 3 of these nominees, and it's going to be up to whether or not Harry Reid can break the filibuster that will determine what the shape of this powerful court looks like.
Right, and he's been threatening, saying that if they do this, if they block these nominations, he will go back to the nuclear option, reform the filibuster as it applies to federal nominees, that all federal nominees would only get an up or down vote, which I know he got a lot of criticism for not doing so before, but he didn't have the votes. Do you think this would give him the votes? Would this actually allow him to change the filibuster?
I hope so. I think what has changed with respect to the filibuster is, so you remember maybe a little more than a year ago, President Obama appointed several people to the National Labor Relations Board and then to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is the new agency that was created to regulate Wall Street. And 2 courts now, with all Republicans making this decision, a total of 5 Republican Court of Appeals judges have now said that those NLRB appointments, the appointments dealing with labor law, are no good.
Right.
If those appointments are no good, that means that most of our labor law, most of our law protecting the right to organize, most of the law preventing workers from firing employers from firing pro-union workers, basically all of the right rules that allow unions to exist, those laws stop functioning. And so we're at a point now where there's potentially an existential threat to the union movement if we don't have the ability to confirm the president's appointees. And I do think that changes the calculus on the Hill. I think you've got senators who were reluctant before who are now going to realize that we can't have a labor movement in this country anymore unless we get some filibuster reform.
Well, and, hopefully they'll stand with him. Actually, hopefully the Republicans just don't block the nominations. But in being a little more realistic, hopefully the Democrats stand up and prevent that from happening. Just to remind everybody, we're speaking with Ian Millhiser from thinkprogress.org. You just wrote, I have to say, a jaw-dropping analysis of federal judge Edith Jones. She has been in the news lately for some very racist comments. And apparently her background it makes those comments look like not even really that bad. What?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's, the Edith Jones story shows you the contrast between the nominees that Obama wants to put up, and some of these nominees from past presidencies that are still sitting on these courts making decisions. So Edith Jones, and I should point out that this hasn't been proven yet. There's probably going to be an investigation, and we'll find out more. But she's accused in a very credible complaint filed with her court's chief judge of saying, among other things, that black people and Hispanic people are predisposed to commit violent crimes. And this is just not an isolated incident with her. She once said that a man whose lawyers slept through much of his trial can be executed. There was a sexual harassment case she sat on, and the facts in this case are absolutely astounding. There's a woman who was groped by her coworkers. One of them would grab her butt with pliers. There was another worker who grabbed her while someone stuck his tongue in her ear. She was told by one coworker, after she reported this, one of her coworkers threatened her. He said he would, quote, cut off her breast and shove it down her throat.
Yeah.
She told her bosses about this. The company did nothing. And Edith Jones said she shouldn't be allowed to sue that company.
Yeah, I have to say that the details that you documented from that case were, I was speechless. It almost sounds unbelievable that anyone, let alone a woman, could not understand how those details represent true, valid, and unjustifiable harassment.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, I had heard about this opinion before because Edith Jones has been on my radar for a while. I never actually read the opinion. And when I sat down to write the piece, having read summaries of what she had said in this opinion and what the facts were, when I read the actual opinion, I was flabbergasted because the actual facts are so much worse than any summary I've ever read. It's the worst kind of sexual harassment I have ever heard of in any work environment. There are repeated examples where she went to management and management refused to do anything meaningful to stop it. And, if you don't get that that's not allowed in the workplace, I have to wonder what planet you're on.
Yeah. I mean, at one point you say here that they said this is just what you get from working with men, essentially. Really?
That's right. That's what her managers told her.
When I say jaw-droppingly horrific, the things that this judge, Edith Jones, has sided with are literally jaw-droppingly horrific. As you mentioned, the man whose lawyer slept through his trial. Going back to Republicans constantly wanting to bring us back to 1950, she thinks porn bans and bans on specific vulgar language should be acceptable. How does that jive with free speech?
Yeah, I mean, she clearly is not operating under the same Constitution that we're operating under. And, even looking past her terrible decisions, she's also this huge attendee of these junkets that some judges are invited to go on, where there are these groups that a lot of the time get all kinds of money from big corporations that have business before these courts. And they fly these judges up to these free trips, and they put them up in resorts. And sometimes the judges are staying with the corporate attorneys who are arguing these cases for these corporations. And Edith Jones is one of the most frequent attendees of these junkets. So, I don't understand the people in the Senate who want to complain that Obama's put three very mainstream nominees up that he wants to put on the D.C. Circuit when they seem to think that Edith Jones is acceptable as a judge on a U.S. Court of Appeals.
Yes, and that she was almost even potentially acceptable as a Supreme Court judge, the seat that John Roberts filled. It really shows why the Senate should have a voice and should have a process in confirming these judges. But obviously, as we've seen under President Obama, that process has been abused and led to huge vacancies. what's your just personal take on Edith and on the DC court system? Is our court system in general just been completely politicized?
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the big problem that we're dealing with right now. There was, starting in the 1930s, there was an understanding in this country, and this understanding for a long time, both parties got this, was that the United States is a democracy. And so the primary role of judges, and yes, around the margins, there are cases where fundamental rights are being stomped on, and it's the judge's job to step in. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, it is not a judge's job to second-guess the policy decisions made by our elected officials, because we elect those officials. We don't elect the judges. What you've been seeing lately, and, the lawsuit challenging the Affordable Care Act was probably the biggest example of this, is you've seen conservatives bringing lawsuits to conservative judges saying, hey, I know we just lost this election, and I know that because we lost this election, the thing that we don't like happened by people who were elected to do it. But I want you, unelected judges, to stop this thing. And you see more and more judges like Edith Jones who are willing to do that for their conservative friends. And that's a serious problem. That's why we need President Obama's nominees confirmed, because they're not going to do that. They're going to respect the democratic process. And that means that if the Republicans win an election, they get to make law. But it means if they don't win an election, they don't get to make law in those circumstances.
Right, and they don't get to get their conservative buddies that the court has been stacked with to adjust those laws accordingly to be pro-business, pro-Republican Party, and often anti-worker, anti-woman, anti-voter. The list goes on. I know people can call their senators and get involved that way. Is there any other way that people can help streamline this process and maybe help to fix this broken system?
I mean, I think the most important thing right now is filibuster reform. The argument that you hear against filibuster reform is that, well, right now Democrats are in the majority. At some point, Republicans are going to be in the majority. And so you hear Democrats saying that we don't want filibuster reform because it could allow the Republicans to govern. And I wonder if those folks slept through the Bush administration. George Bush got a whole lot of what he wanted. George Bush got his tax cuts through. George Bush got a whole lot of terrible judges through, including Justice Alito, who was one of the most conservative people on the lower courts before he became a Supreme Court justice. If you're worried about a Republican administration getting someone confirmed to the Supreme Court that will overrule Roe, Justice Alito wrote an opinion as a lower court judge that completely dismantled Roe. And he managed to get a promotion to the Supreme Court. So the filibuster doesn't really work to block presidents like George W. Bush from getting what they want. What it is doing is it's blocking President Obama from being able to undo a lot of the damage that President Bush did. And so I really don't understand the argument for keeping the filibuster in place.
Well, that certainly makes two of us, and I recommend that everybody keeps up to date and informed about these issues by following all your work at Think Progress Justice. Ian, I really appreciate all the time you take to join us and just to help us sort through these issues. And amazing coverage on Edith Jones. I, again, just say it was literally jaw-dropping.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ian. We hope to talk to you again soon.
All right, thank you.
Ian Millhiser of Think Progress. You can check it out at thinkprogress.org. You can follow him on Twitter at @Millhiser. And, of course, all those links will be up after the show.
Now you see why Think Progress should have their own shows, because there's so much. You cannot get to everything in a segment. There are so many issues.
There's no way. I think we could talk to Ian for 3 hours and still not run out of stuff to talk to.
In fact, I think it's a great idea. He's a little busy, though.
He's got a thing or two on his plate.
He posts so many times a day, especially the Supreme Court. I mean, this week, 2 cases. I'm thinking Fisher and the voting rights probably this week.
Yes, maybe you'll run into...
My gut is churning, saying, okay,
Maybe you will run into Ian at the court and will be able to say hello in person.
Maybe I won't go. I'll just read what he writes because
do a better job anyway.
He will.
Okay. No. You're listening to Talking Left. Special thanks to Ian Millhiser for helping us get through all this stuff. We're going to come back with more in just a few minutes. Stick around.
What is this? What's going on?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Kentucky AFL-CIO President Bill Londrigan says the United Mine Workers of America's struggle against Peabody Energy's theft of worker pensions and retiree health benefits is part of a larger war on workers aimed at destroying the labor movement. Londrigan, speaking at a Kentucky UMWA rally, said that working people must choose a side in this war.
You either have to be on the side of workers and their unions, or you're on the side that wants to destroy unions. You have to be either on the side of Peabody Coal and the bankruptcy court, or you have to be on the side of coal miners, retirees, widows, and children. There is no middle ground, brothers and sisters. If you are on our side, then you must be willing to accept the principle of solidarity, of trade union solidarity, of class solidarity.
The International Brotherhood of Teamsters is asking the courts for a rehearing on its challenge to the Department of Transportation's cross-border Mexican trucking program. The pilot program allowing Mexican trucks access to the U.S. through essentially open borders was upheld by the U.S. Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. last month. The Teamsters assert that there is a serious safety issue with the program since Mexican trucks don't have to comply with federal safety requirements in U.S. interstate commerce. The union says a rehearing is necessary because the appeals court dismissal of the union's claims conflicts with earlier decisions at both the appeals court and U.S. Supreme Court level. The AFL-CIO Buildings Trade Department says it was a rare victory in Congress for local prevailing wage laws that went unnoticed in the media. An attempt was made by Republican Iowa Representative Steve King to deny funding for enforcement of the Davis-Bacon Act on military construction projects. That amendment was defeated. The building trades unions say that 36 GOP members of Congress sided with the unions on locally prevailing wage laws. The Davis-Bacon Act makes sure that local prevailing wage rates are paid on construction projects using federal money. Religious organizations are losing in court when they discriminate against pregnant employees. Jesse Russell reports.
A federal jury has ruled in favor of a woman who said she was fired by 2 religious schools for being pregnant out of wedlock. The Archdiocese of Cincinnati said Krista Diaz, a part-time teacher at 2 schools, was in violation of Catholic religious tenets after she became pregnant through artificial insemination. The jury awarded Diaz $171,000 and said the firing amounted to pregnancy discrimination. In response to the verdict, the American Civil Liberties Union released a press release stating that the ruling reaffirmed that religious freedom doesn't give an organization the right to discriminate. The case echoes a discrimination charge filed by ACLU of Ohio in February. In that case, a single mother was fired from a religious organization known as Inside Out. In the complaint, the claimant said the organization has produced a culture of fear in which women who work for the organization, married or otherwise, are afraid of pregnancy.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
This is Nnamdi Asamoah. I play football for the Philadelphia Eagles, but what I do off the field with United Way might be more important. I'm a volunteer tutor and mentor. Why? Because over 1 million kids a year drop out of school, and that's not okay. It takes 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be me, or it could be you. Studies show that if we get to these kids earlier, their chances are better, and kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. So join me in United Way. Suit up and take the pledge. Become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor, because when a child succeeds, we all succeed. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council, and the National Football League.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shana.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. In just a few minutes, we're going to speak with Josh Idelson of The Nation. He's been covering the Walmart strike going on in Arkansas at the Walmart headquarters, and we're going to get his take on that, as well as speak with him about his story about the billionaires that run Walmart. Billionaires. And this week...
Billionaires who are job creators?
Billionaires who are job creators, allegedly. Shane just handed me this amazing testimony.
And by the way, I found this courtesy of Think Progress.
That doesn't surprise me.
It's the top story there, and I went through links and I found the actual testimony.
Doesn't surprise me because they're awesome. And this is just jaw-dropping, astounding testimony of Nick Hanauer.
Hanauer. Nick Hanauer. He was one of the original investors in Amazon. One of the companies he started merged with Overstock. He's a capital.
He's a billionaire.
He's a billionaire, entrepreneur, investor, who says he's not a job creator.
Yes, he testified before the Senate Banking Committee on Housing Subcommittee on Economic Policy, and I just want to read to you directly from his testimony because it is
astounding.
Yes. He begins saying, for 30 years, Americans on the right and the left have accepted a particular explanation for the origins of prosperity in capitalist economies. It is that rich people like me are, quote, job creators. And he goes on, I'm going to skip a few lines here.
I like this line here, that if taxes go up on us and our companies, we will create fewer jobs. And if lower taxes are there, more jobs will be created and therefore more general prosperity.
Right.
In other words, taxes go up, less jobs, taxes go down, more jobs.
He says, many of you in this room are certain that these claims are true, but sometimes the ideas that we know to be true are dead wrong. He goes on, my argument today is this. In the same way that that it's a fact that the sun, not the earth, is the center of our solar system, it is also a fact that the middle class, not rich business people like me, are the center of America's economy. Prosperity is built from the middle out.
Yes, that's why the real job creators in America are middle-class consumers. The money that they have and the money they can buy, the more money they can buy, the more like me have to hire to meet demand. In this sense, calling ourselves job creators isn't just inaccurate, it's disingenuous.
Says that's why our current policies are upside down. When you have a tax system in which most of the exemptions and the lowest rates benefit the richest, all in the name of job creation, all that happens is the rich get richer. He is making the case that many on the left have been saying for some time, that the rich are not the job creators, that the real job creators are you and me and working class people. And he's saying it's not a theory, it's not partisan, it's a fact. And that's probably what we're going to get into with Josh Idelson next. Don't go anywhere, you're listening to Talking Left, and we'll be back with more.